Good evening. Hello. Welcome. Come on in. Let's have a seat. Let's gather around. All right. Good to see all of you here on this beautiful Sunday evening. Yes, that's right. This Sunday in the evening. And yes, I am live. Welcome to the Jaybefaunt channel. I am your host, James Fauntleroy. So good to see all of you here today. The Jaybefaunt channel is available on all major podcast platforms. So go ahead and subscribe to me there. Also part of the Revolutionary Blackout Network. So you can see me on Sundays, Tuesdays, and Thursdays. And as well as you can see me regularly on Tuesdays at 2 p.m. Also, if you guys would like to, you guys can also go to my Substack. You guys can go to jaybefaunt.substack.com to get email notifications so that you guys can actually get notifications, because the YouTube notifications aren't so reliable. So there you go. You guys can go there and get notifications. Thank you to all the people who have subscribed so far. Also, to anybody who has already subscribed to my Patreon, Coffee, or any other platforms to give me mutual aid, thank you so very much to all of you for this. Without you guys, I would not be able to do this. And yeah, it's been rough, but you know what? I appreciate all the help, and you guys don't realize how much this means to me. So, as as the title suggests, I am going to be doing a reading. Why am I doing a reading tonight for Assata Shakur? Because today is Assata Shakur's birthday. And so I want to wish Miss Assata Shakur a very happy birthday by also, as a tribute, reading her book. What are we going to be doing? We're going to be doing the Assata Shakur reading. We are going to be reading chapter 13. So I am excited about this. Now, the thing is that about this chapter actually gets into it has a very explosive beginning, right? And once we get into that, you'll understand exactly what it is. But then we're also going to get into Assata Shakur and how she navigates getting into the organizational space. And so we're going to be talking about that as well. I think this is actually a really good chapter to really get into, as far as, mulling over in your own mind organizational spaces, and how that can be a benefit to you, and really just asking yourself, like, how this would do for me, and how can I benefit the community around me. I think this is really good. And it also she also talks about her association with different races and their organizational structures. So this is going to be something that's going to be interesting to get into. Are you ready? And if you have already liked the stream, thank you so much for the early like. And if you want to wait till the end, go ahead and wait till the end to like the stream. But I hope you do it nonetheless. So we get into this and say hello to everybody. Oh, you know what? Before I do that, let me say hello to people who are in the chat. Sean Miller coming in saying, "You're good to see you, Sean." All right. So let's get into chapter 13. This begins on page 195. I'm at school when I hear about it. Electric shocks are zooming down my back the way they do when I'm about to go temporarily insane. On the train, headed uptown, I'm ready to riot. I'm having daymares on the subway, imagining myself with a long knife slashing slits in white sheets. Ku Klux Klan blood is spilling. You want to look like a ghost? You want to look like a ghost? My mind keeps chanting. You want to look like a ghost? Well, I'll make you look like one. Sitting on a subway, bloody fantasies. I look out of my daymare. Nobody is moving. Everybody screams. Everybody has a frozen face. The train is slowing down. Everybody is tensely looking at the door. 125th Street. I'm going to a riot. I want to kill someone. Martin Luther King has been murdered. The streets wake up. There is no blood yet. Everybody is getting into position. The wind is blowing rumors. The people are waiting. The streets are rumbling. The tanks are coming. The natives are restless. The tanks will quiet the natives. The tanks are coming. I feel absurd and impotent. Who am I going to attack? Where is a George Lincoln Rockwell? I'm ready to kill him. He will get a chance to utter exactly 2 syllables before I cut him off. He isn't there. Only the rumors and the rumble of the tanks and the waiting. The store windows are filled with shit. You can't exchange Martin Luther King for shit in the store window. Smashing windows would do me no good. I'm beyond that. I want blood. The tanks are waiting to crush the resistance, squelch the disturbance. It crosses my mind. I want to win. I don't want to rebel. I want to win. The revolution will not be televised on the 6 o'clock news. I have to get myself ready. Revolution. The word has me going. I am back on the subway. Nobody is looking at anybody. I think I have my period. Sweat is rolling down my legs. I go home. My mother is glad to see me. She knows that I am half crazy. The television is wet with crocodile tears. Rebellion, rebellious children, temper tantrums, rebellion, revolution. I like the word. The Grim Reapers are abuzz. Reports about the natives. They're excited. This is the stuff that the news is made of. We are looking at each other. Impassioned speeches sizzle on their tongues, causing sour ashes to fall from our mouths. We are just sitting there. I am thinking about revolution, the tonic, abstract revolution. I am tired of watching us lose. They kill our leaders. Then they kill us for protesting. Protest, protest, revolution. If it exists, I want to find it. Bulletins, more bulletins. I'm tired of bulletins. I want bullets. While I was going to CCNY, I graduated from Manhattan Community College. I decided to get married. My husband was politically conscious, intelligent, and decent, and our affair was frantic, high-pitched, and charged with emotion. Excuse me. Somehow, I believed that our shared commitment to the Black liberation struggle would result in a marriage made in heaven. I spent most of my time at school, meetings or demonstrations, and whenever I was at home, my head was usually stuck in some book. It was unthinkable of me to allow more than 5 minutes on mundane things like keeping house or washing dishes. To complicate matters, my husband's ideas about marriage stemmed mostly from his parents' life, where his mother was the homemaker and his father was the breadwinner. Spaghetti was about the only thing I can cook, and he was profoundly shocked to learn that I had none of his mother's domestic skills. After a while, it became clear to me that I was about ready to be married as I was to grow wings and fly. So after a confused and unhappy year, we decided we made much better friends than marriage partners and called it quits. I decided to go to California. It was becoming increasingly clear to me that although it was important for students to participate in the struggle, no revolution had ever been won by students alone. Struggling around school issues had narrowed my perspective and I was getting bogged down. I wanted to expand that struggle to the Black community. At that time, California, especially the Bay Area, what was where everything was happening. Some of my favorite professors were going out west for the summer, and they offered to hook me up with a place to stay. As usual, I was flat broke, but a good friend gave me the money to make the trip with a little spending change thrown in. My friends found a place for me in Berkeley, the most radical progressive place I had ever been in. Revolutionary protesters were plastered all over the walls, along with the people's murals. The fronts of banks and other official buildings were bricked up as a result of the demonstrations and street fighting that had followed the People's Park struggles. Red Stars and Mao's Red Book were sold on street corners, and food cooperatives sold health food at cheap prices. People's collectives were dedicated to surviving, struggling, and teaching. I was impressed with the kinds of informal solutions that had cooked up to deal with the problems they face. And I enrolled in the practical skills classes they gave me, printing and layout, first aid, etc. There were books and pamphlets in the San Francisco and Berkeley bookstores, I had never seen in New York. And for the first time, I read theory of urban guerrilla warfare as outlined by Che Guevara, Carlos Mangualera, and the Tupamaros. I have been more aware of imperialism in Vietnam or Cambodia and the extent of U.S. imperialism of South and Central America surprised me. The U.S. government had invaded more than 15 countries there, not once or twice, but in some cases, more than 10 times. And the guerrilla movements were waging armed struggle in most of them. Reading about guerrilla warfare in South America and Vietnam was one thing, but thinking in terms of guerrilla war inside the U.S. was another. Back then, people used the word revolution just because it sounded hip. Half the time, what they were really talking about was change or some kind of vague progress. We're going to have a political revolution. Remember? 2016, 2020, everybody kept saying, oh, we're going to have a political revolution. It was just reform. And not even reform at that, right? Every single time somebody's like, oh my God, we're going to you have a revolution. They don't actually mean a revolution. They're actually just mean reform. The term revolution is also a means to talk about something turning around completely 180 degrees. This is why when it talks about a day, the earth has a complete revolution. Revolution meaning from sun up to sundown. That means a complete 180 degree turn from one side to the completely to the other. Reform and revolution are two different things. I'll put it this way. Reform is renovating a house. Revolution is tearing down the entire building and building the house brand new. That's the difference between reform and revolution. Get it? All right. Some meant a separate black nation, and others dealt with black revolution as part of an overall revolution waged by whites, Hispanics. She says Orientals, Asian, Native Americans, and blacks. Malcolm said it meant bloodshed and land. To me, the revolutionary struggle of black people had to be against racism, capitalism, imperialism, and sexism for a real freedom under a socialist government. But the reality of achieving it seemed a long way off. In Berkeley and San Francisco, the revolution didn't seem too far away. A lot of white radicals, hippies, Chicanos, blacks, and Asians were ready to get down. But I hadn't forgot the hard hats and the rednecks in the Bible Belt and the so-called middle Americans who had elected Nixon. I couldn't imagine the new left talking to those people, much less organizing them and changing their minds. Does that sound like somebody to you? Right? The new left, not wanting to talk to people who may have right-wing proclivities, right? They'll say, oh my God, you want to associate with the far right. When in reality, in order to bring people to the left, you actually have to go to the right to bring them to the left. See? This stuff ain't new, baby. You have Assata Shakur talking about this way back then. But in order to bring people over to your side, you have to go to them, meet them where they are, and bring them over. A lot of people just don't get that concept. I decided the only way I would come up with some answers was to keep on studying and struggling. I didn't know how half of what I was studying would fit in, but I figured it would come in handy someday. I read about guerrilla warfare and clandestine struggle without having the faintest idea that one day I will go underground. It's kind of funny when you think about it, because reading all that stuff probably has saved my life a million times. As part of my first aid skill class, I worked as an assistant to a doctor who would volunteer once a week at Alcatraz. At the same time, Alcatraz has been taken over by Native Americans who are protesting against a long series of broken treaties, genocidal policies, and racist exploitation. Alcatraz symbolized the strength and dignity of Indian people, as well as their resolve to fight to preserve their cultural traditions. I enjoyed everything about going there except the trip. The doctor was a motorcycle fanatic who insisted on zooming across the Golden Gate Bridge on that thing with me hanging on for dear life. Once on the other side, we were jumping to a rickety little boat with water in the bottom and limp across the bay to the island. By the time we got there, I felt as if I had done a day's work. The first thing that hit me was the spirit of the people. I felt a tremendous pride, tremendous determination, and a tremendous calm from the time I landed on the island until the time I left. There were Native Americans from all over North America, including Canada, from different tribes and backgrounds. They were young and old, little babies and wiggled in their mother's arms. And one old man who had spent many years in Alcatraz prison said that when he arrived on the island, he had taken a sledgehammer and reduced the cell he had once been locked in to rubble. The prison, one of the most infamous and sadistic ever to exist, loomed in the background. There were many different Indian nations, each with its own rich culture, religious tradition, history, and folklore. Everybody was into learning and teaching each other their own history and had been raised in cities and knew nothing who they were. It was a surprise to find out how many Native Americans had been raised in cities and knew nothing about who they were. In that respect, they were very similar to Black people. Most of them were from the West Coast. So I had told them about the Indian Museum and the Museum of Natural History in New York. Suddenly, I stopped short. I wonder how I would feel going into some museum and seeing the houses and stolen artifacts of my people stuck away in some exhibition hall. As I spoke, I realized that most of the history had been taught about the Indians was probably lies invented by the white man. There's an African American museum in Washington, D.C. Part of me is like, is it worth me going there? Because history is written by the victor. You know, not the exploiter. So part of me is like, even if I were to go, should have to take all the history lessons with a grain of salt. Interesting. It wasn't until later, for instance, that I learned that scalping was an old European custom. In the late 1700s, the state of Massachusetts was paying the equivalent of $60 for a scalp, and Pennsylvania paid $134. It wasn't until more than 100 years later, in response to the massive genocide at the hands of whites, that the Indians themselves started scalping. Actually, I meant to look this up just to give everybody a reference of what scalping is. So let me just show you guys the definition really quick so that you guys know exactly what it is. So scalping, it says take the scalp of an enemy as a battle trophy. So basically that's what it is. And so really, according to Assata Shakur, it was an old European custom. So it did not start with Native Americans. Interesting. None of the little museum exhibits featuring teepees and feathered headdresses had ever mentioned how men, women, and children were mowed down at Wounded Knee, or how the U.S. Army had purposely given the Indians smallpox infected blankets. As I listened to those sisters and brothers at Alcatraz, I realized that the true history of any oppressed people is impossible to find in history books. I will always be grateful for having the opportunity to visit Alcatraz. I will never forget the quiet confidence of the Indians as they went about their lives calmly, even though they were under the constant threat of invasion by the FBI and the US military. They didn't fit into any of my preconceived notions or the stereotype images shown on TV and in the movies. They were really open with me, and after a while, we talked about the struggle in general. They had many of the same problems we had: education, organizing the people to struggle, and raising consciousness. They damn sure had the same enemy, and they were doing as bad as we were, if not worse. They told me to check out Aquasini, Aquasani when I returned to New York. It was a territory they had liberated on the border between New York and Canada. I told them if they ever came to New York, they should visit me and check out Harlem. Sure. When are you going to liberate it? They asked. There were a million groups in the Bay Area I want to check out. There was so much activity, I would have to spend 28 hours a day just to keep up with it all. Someone I was studying with arranged for me to hook up with the Brown Berets, a Chicano group that had been started recently in California and Texas. It was a brief meeting since the brother with whom I had the appointment had to be on the move. He ran down to me all of the some of the conditions excuse me, they were dealing with and some of the work that they were doing. I had always thought of the Chicano movement as a rural rather than an urban one. Most of the information we had received was about the Chicano farm worker struggle and people like Cesar Chavez fighting to organize them and abolish the unbearable living conditions and slave wages they were forced to work for. And so the thing is that this is still going on. When you look at a lot of migrants, especially migrants from Nicaragua, Honduras, Venezuela, Mexico, a lot of them are subject to inhumane working conditions. They're being exploited. And so in reality, when you think about that, when we think about workers, we have to think about the ones that are undocumented in our country too. We need to have solidarity with them because they are also being abused. And so this is why it's so important. So now you got the Brown Berets, the Chicanos, that are actually also fighting for liberation. That's important. I was not aware that Chicanos in the city were fighting against unemployment, police brutality, and inferior schools, just like Black people. In the same way that the Black Panther Party was trying to organize and politicize street gangs in Chicago, the Brown Berets wanted to politicize Chicano street gangs in Los Angeles. Think about this. Black Panthers bringing together the Crips, the Bloods, the Young Disciples, right? Chicanos are Chicanos, like leftist Chicanos trying to bring together MS-13 and the Latin Kings and say, let's stop with this violence against each other. Let's actually do movements. That's dangerous to the state because then that means that you're bringing people who are skilled in some type of warfare that are willing to push to change the system and stop going up against each other. Mind you, that was what Tupac Shakur was doing before he died. He was actually uniting the Crips and the Bloods. And then he got taken out. The brother also told me that they have been doing a lot of work around Los Siete de las Razas, 7 Chicano brothers who have been accused of killing a San Francisco policeman. They were later acquitted. I wanted to rap some more about this case because I was seeing the same pattern everywhere. Sisters and brothers being locked up all over the country, accused of killing pigs or conspiring to. The brother had to run, though. We promised that we would hook up again, but it never happened. Next, I wanted to check out the Red Guard, a group of young revolutionary brothers and sisters who were struggling in Chinatown, San Francisco. I was especially anxious to meet up with them because it was so hard to get information about them back east. The West Coast had the largest Asian population in the country, and I really wanted to get a good idea about what was going on in the Asian communities. A lot of people think Asians do not experience racism, that they are professionals and business owners, unaware that many are poor and oppressed. So yeah, by the way, a lot of people don't know this, but it's US policy that if you come from an Asian country, they want the people who basically already have money that come from there. And they basically want a lot of the people who are professionals, PMC. So let's say you're from India. Well, they want somebody that's PMC in India who's maybe like an engineer, a doctor, something like that. They don't want poor Indians from India coming here. They don't want poor Sri Lankans. They don't want anybody that's poor from Vietnam. They don't want anybody poor from Indonesia. They don't want anybody poor from Korea. They want anybody and everybody that is a professional or PMC that has already gotten their schooling, that already has it decent in those countries over there, and then they can come over here. So they don't want the people who probably be more revolutionary minded coming over here. See how they work? See how our government works? And so, but there is still a lot of Asian people that have come over here that just don't have it that good. And there are poor Asian people who experience the racism and the white supremacy that goes on within this country, and they see that this system is unsustainable. So yeah. Finding the Red Guard was not at all easy. Half the people I ran into had never heard of them, and the other half only had a minimal knowledge of who they were and what they were all about. Someone gave me an address, and since I didn't have the faintest idea where it was, I got a brother to drive me over to Chinatown to look for the headquarters. We ended up getting lost and never did find the address. Instead, we ended up eating at a Chinese restaurant and getting into a big debate. He couldn't understand why a black woman wanted to hook up with Chinese revolutionaries in the first place. Ain't nobody gonna free black folks. Those Chinese don't give a damn about you and me. All they care about is their own people and what's going on in China. I told him that I thought that there were a lot of us in the same predicament, and that only way we were going to get out of it was to come together and break the chains. The brother looked at me as if I was sprouting empty rhetoric. Some of the laws of the revolution are so simple they seem impossible. People think that in order for something to work, it has to be complicated, but a lot of times the opposite is true. We usually reach success by putting the simple truths that we know into practice. The basis of any struggle is people coming together to fight against a common enemy. That's the point. This is why they do not want us to truly unite. They will use methods like racism, misogyny, queerphobia, homophobia, transphobia. They will use different things like xenophobia, looking at undocumented people with disdain, like they are the problem, when in reality, it's actually the corporate dictators that are the problem. And so this is why it's so important to realize that we all are united in our struggle, and we all need to come together. Because guess what? An Asian person in this country is having a struggle just like a black person, just like a white person, just like a Latino, just like somebody who is non-binary, just like somebody who is an undocumented immigrant, just like a woman. It doesn't matter. The thing is that we are all suffering under the same system. And so it takes us uniting to be able to do that. And I'm so glad that Assata Shakur mentioned this in this chapter. She continues, when I finally did get around to meeting some brothers and sisters from the Red Guard, it was quite by accident and somewhat embarrassing. I was hanging out in the park with the sister and some brothers from the Black Students Union. We were exchanging experiences, talking politics, and smoking reefer. The day was blue and beautiful, and we just sat there lazing in the sun without a care in the world, listening to some rock music that was playing in the background. I had brought a whole pile of leaflets and newspapers from New York to give them. Everybody was feeling laid back and mellow when all of a sudden a bunch of pigs descended on a group of hippies and proceeded to beat them up mercilessly, kicking them and hitting them with clubs. We were all so high. We just sat there watching like it was a movie or something. By the time we got our voices together to cry out and protest, the pigs were carrying the hippies off. Two Asian brothers came up to us and pointed to the newspapers. You better get rid of those before the pigs see them, one said. More are on the way. If you got any grass on you, you better get out of here fast. We were in a picture of confusion, stuffing sheets of paper under shirts and into pocketbooks. The Asian brother led our half-day's procession out of the park. You need a lift? Yeah, that's cool. To where? Oh, anywhere. Anywhere from here, one of us answered. We were too high to make any decisions. We piled into a rickety-looking Jeep. They told us they would drive us over to Shattuck Street and drop us off. As we were driving, everybody started talking about the pigs beating up on the hippies. The image was burning in everyone's mind. That was a trip, drawled one of the BSU brothers. Did you see those pigs? I thought they were going to kill those dudes. I was high, feeling so too stunned and eerie to talk. That's why we need a revolution, the sister was saying. They just think they can do anything they want to. What started this shit? Somebody asked the Asian brothers. It was some hassle about ID or something. They just wanted to hassle somebody. You're lucky they didn't see you first. See all those videos where police are like, can I see your ID? And they have no probable cause. They just want to hassle. Yeah. It's been happening, going on for years. We were all silent for a minute. Imagine ourselves being beaten and carted off to jail. It's a good thing they didn't see those leaflets, the other Asian brother said. They would have hassled you for sure. The sister, who was obviously angry, got off into a political rap. Everybody kind of jumped into the conversation, talking about the situation in the black community, the black student struggle, and the overall piggishness of America. Everybody was into the rap, all of us presenting ourselves as political activists and revolutionaries. Are you guys in the movement? One of the Asian brothers asked us. Everybody jumped at an opportunity to say yes, giving credentials and naming organizations. Right on, they said. They told us that they were Red Guard cadre and that they were having some kind of forum on the revolution in China. In my tongue-tied, confused state of marijuana intoxication, I tried to communicate with them that I had been trying to get in touch with their organization to check it out. The brother who had been doing most of the talking reached down under the seat and handed me a leaflet which had date and the time of the forum. Make sure you come and check it out, he said. Put this somewhere where you don't lose it, making direct reference to my confused, disjointed state of consciousness. You guys should really be careful with that grass, especially when you got leaflets or newspapers on you. A lot of good comrades have been busted like that. Yeah, said the other one. You got to be alert to deal with the situation. You got to be disciplined and ready to deal with the enemy at all times. The Red Guard brothers dropped us off, and we thanked them and said goodbyes, and amid a hail of right-ons and power to the people, carefully avoid each other's eyes, we wandered aimlessly, looking for some place where we could plop down and get our heads together. I was feeling guilty and stupid, silly and politically backward. I was embarrassed to be bumbling down the street in the middle of the day and not in full control of my faculties, too high to deal with reality, much less change it. I wonder what the brothers from the Red Guard had thought of us, sitting there in a stupor, having to be virtually let out of the park. It was obviously my stuff was raggedy, and I had needed to get my act together. If I wanted to call myself a revolutionary, I would have to earn the title. I had heard somebody say that revolutionaries get high on revolution, and that was the best high in the world. I'm going to check out that high, I said aloud. Huh? What'd you say? Nothing, I answered. I was just talking out loud. Oh, somebody said. I can dig it. Thing is that when it comes to different races of people and how they're coming together for their liberation, this is why coalitions are so important. So you have the Red Guard, which are Asian revolutionaries. You have the Brown Berets, which are Chicano revolutionaries or Mexican. You have the Young Lords, Puerto Rican revolutionaries, Young Patriots, white revolutionaries, Black Panthers, black revolutionaries. So there's so many of us that realize what the problem is. And it's important to realize that we all need to come together. I wonder if the Red Guard's still around. That would be awesome to get some of them to come on to talk. I would love that. I know the new era Young Lords, excuse me, they're around. And I would love to talk to them. I follow one on TikTok, and he is always talking about, he's always talking about organizing community. I would love to have him on. But yeah, it's very important to, unite with these people of different races who realize the same struggles that we have and that want to come together. I think that's very important. We stepped off into a coffee shop and had some tea. Everybody looked sheepish and lost in their own thoughts. Finally, we waved our goodbyes and made our separate ways. I walked back to where I was staying, wondering what I was going to have to do to become who I needed to become. Revolution is about change, and the first place that change begins is in yourself. The most important organization on my list to check out was the Black Panther Party headquarters in Oakland. I had a whole lot of respect for the party and had been heavily influenced by it, as had almost everyone around my age that I knew, including my mom. She was interested in them too back in the day. Every time he heard about Huey Newton and Bobby Seale standing up to the power structure, we slapped five and said, yeah! As far as I was concerned, the Panthers were bad. The party was more than bad, it was bodacious. The sheer audacity of walking onto the California Senate floor with rifles, demanding that black people have the right to bear arms and the right to self-defense, made me sit back and take a long look at them. And the more political I became, the more I appreciated them. Panthers didn't try to sound all intellectual, talking about the national bourgeoisie, the military industrial complex, the reactionary ruling class. They simply called a pig a pig. They didn't refer to the repressive domestic army or the state repressive apparatus. They called the racist police pigs and racist dogs. This is also the interesting part. As people who are on the left, when we're talking or speaking to people who are not on the left, it's not necessarily a dumbing down, but speaking in more plain layman's terms, so that excuse me, speaking in plain layman's terms, so that people can understand what we mean. So this is why when I'm speaking to somebody who is not part of the left, instead of using words like proletariat, I'll just say workers. Because the thing is that you want people to understand what you mean. The point isn't to sound smart. The point is to get people to understand what you mean so that they grasp it. It is more important for them to understand you than for you to impress them with eloquence. And that's the point. Some people will speak very fast, like a Ben Shapiro, and try to make themselves sound extremely intelligent, when in reality, the best way to teach people is to speak as plainly as possible and to speak with distinction so that they can understand every word you're saying. A good teacher will meet their students where they are. That's how we have to be. Sometimes it's not that easy because then we have to kind of simplify things. But that simplification helps people to grasp concept, to grasp meaning, so that once they grasp it, then you can graduate them to a little bit more. And so you can say the military corporations, you can say the military corporations like Raytheon, Northrop Grumman, Lockheed Martin, and so on and so forth. And then somebody will be able to get that. But then you can start to say, oh, we call that group of them the military industrial complex. And then you can teach them that. So that's what it means. And so we have to be careful with how, we talk, because some people may not be able to grasp it so well. So meet the people where they are as far as our rhetoric, and then move them from there, guide them from there. One of the most important things the party did was to make it really clear who the enemy was. Not the white people, but the capitalistic, imperialistic oppressors. This is also important. A lot of times, those of us who are black, who are on the left, we can sometimes make it sound like we can be kind of alienating towards white people, when in reality, it's not necessarily white people that we're talking about, even though a majority of them are the part of the oppressor class. But at the same time, we also have to get them to understand that a lot of the poor white people are really just being used by the oppressor class in order to be part of that apparatus that keeps us all down. And I think that's important. They took the Black liberation struggle out of national context and put it into an international context. The party supported revolutionary struggles and governments all over the world and insisted the U.S. get out of Africa, out of Asia, out of Latin America, and out of the ghetto too. I had gotten to know some of the Panthers in New York when they spoke at the lectures we invited them to at Manhattan Community College. I made it my business to drop by some of the New York Black Panther Party offices and offer to help them with this or that. Whatever they needed to be done, I was happy to do it. I barely opened my mouth. I just looked, listened, and worked. Some of the comrades would just ask why I didn't join. I probably will someday, I'd always answer. When I heard on the radio that the New York Panthers had been busted, I was furious. The so-called conspiracy charges were so stupid that even a fool could see through them. The police actually had the audacity to charge them with plotting to blow up the flowers in the botanical garden. And the 21 were some of the baddest, most politically educated sisters and brothers in the party. It was an insult. I thought about joining the party right then, but I had some other things I wanted to do, and I needed to a low profile in order to do them. As much as I dug the party, I also had some real differences with his style of work. As I opened the front gate of the Oakland headquarters, I felt just as nervous about going inside as I did about the Doberman pinchers running around the yard. My brother opened the door, and I had nervously blurted out that I was from New York and I had come to check out the party. He acted like he was glad to see me and brought me into a room to meet some of the other Panthers. A group of sisters and brothers were sitting around the room, laughing and talking. They greeted me casually, passing over a chair for me to sit in. Artie Seal was there, and I had to control myself to keep from gawking at her. I wondered how she felt with her husband being in jail, being railroaded and bound and gagged in court. I recognized the names of others. It was a struggle to be there in a room with those people. It was like sitting down in the pages of a history book. They asked me about New York. I had told them what was happening with the with the black students in Manhattan Community College, CCNY, and the black student movement in general, the anti-war movement, the black construction workers, and whatever others I was involved in at the time. I told them I had done some work for the New York Panthers and ran off a list of the ones I knew. Somebody asked me why I never joined the party. Half stammering, I told them I had thought about it, but had decided not to. Why? Everyone wanted to know. It was hard for me to say because I felt so much love and respect for the sisters and brothers seated there, but I knew I'd hate myself if I didn't say what was on my mind. That I had been turned off by the way the spokesman for the party talked to the people, that their attitude had often been arrogant, flippant, and disrespectful. I told them that I preferred the polite and respectful manner in which the civil rights workers and black Muslims talked to the people rather than the arrogant fuck you style that used to be popular in New York. I said they cursed too much and turned off a lot of black people who would otherwise be responsive to what the party was saying. Some people may say, "Oh my God, they're policing our language. They're trying to tell us to censor ourselves." Some people would say, you know, um, it's respectability politics, you know. And in reality, one of the reasons why I don't curse that much on my channel anymore is because I want it to be accessible to as many people as possible. Now, once in a while, yeah, I will, but mostly I want people to be able to listen to my streams even when the little kids around. They don't have to be like, "Oh, I got to listen to this later." You know what I mean? So I want it to be like that. I want it to have more accessibility. And the thing is that our love for people has to go into a point where sometimes we have to meet people where they are, even in how sometimes we may express certain things. And so we can't have this "well, screw you" attitude when we're trying to bring people over. Not everybody is going to like our style, but if we can make it so that it's more universal, I think that's the point. Should make it more universal so that it appeals to more people. Because the end goal is the victory at the end. When I had finished, I waited nervously, fully expecting them to jump all over what I had said. To my profound surprise, nobody did. Everybody agreed that if that was, in fact, how party members were relating to the people, they should change at once. One of the sisters pointed out that there was a leadership crisis in the New York chapter because the arrest and imprisonment of the Panther 21. It was well known by everybody in that movement that the New York police had kidnapped the most experienced, able, and intelligent leaders of the New York branch and demanded $100,000 legit. I'm sorry, that they demanded $100,000 ransom for each one. One of the brothers explained that the Panthers were facing the same problem all over the country because of persecution by the pigs. We spent the rest of the afternoon rapping about the black struggle in New York and in the U.S. in general. I was deep in a discussion about strategy and tactics when Emory Douglas came in. I was as happy as a bee in a pollen factory to meet him. I dug his artwork, and a lot had been taped since, and I even taped a piece he had written on revolutionary art to my closet door. We hit it off at once, and when everybody finished rapping, he took me up to see how the Black Panther newspaper was being put together. I was truly impressed by the Panthers in Oakland. After my first visit, I dropped in at their offices regularly. I visited some of the other branches in the area, talking about the people and asking my usual ton of questions. I spent a couple nights working at the distribution center for the party paper, which was located in the Fulton district in San Francisco. It was a trip. The papers wouldn't get picked up from the printer until late in the evening, and the people would work until the wee hours sorting them out and preparing them for distribution to the Panther offices all around the country. Panthers worked there, but the majority seemed to be sisters and brothers from the neighborhood who had just dropped in to give the Panthers a hand. A lot of young people were there, and some elderly sisters and brothers. As we wrapped up papers in bundles, printed addresses, and counted out papers, we sang Panther songs and marching chants. Every now and then, a few stepped outside to sip a little bitter dog. This was supposedly a Panther invention made of a red port and lemon juice. It wasn't too bad once you got used to it, and by the time 1 a.m. came around, I loved it. Working on the paper distribution didn't even seem like work. It was more like a party. Somebody always gave me a lift home, and I would fall into a happy sleep, feeling refreshed and renewed. Excuse me. It was splashed across the papers, blaring on the radio. Yet I still couldn't believe it. The face of the serious young man with the gun refused to leave my thoughts. I must have picked up the newspaper and put it down 100 times. This shit was serious. 17 years old with a rifle under his raincoat. 17 years old and taking freedom into his own hands. 17 years old and defying the whole pig power structure in America. 17 years old and dead. Tears I didn't even know I had poured out. I got on the phone to find somebody who could explain it all. Who was Jonathan Jackson? Who was the young man who came to free a revolutionary black prisoner, holding the district attorney and a pig judge hostage, shouting, We are the revolutionaries. Free the Soledad brothers by 12:30. Who was he? I had only vaguely heard of the Soledad brothers. A brother who knew all about the case broke it down to me. 3 unarmed black prisoners were shot down in a yard by a white guard. A grand jury ruled it a justifiable homicide. After the verdict, a white guard was found dead. 3 politically conscious black prisoners were charged with the murder and thrown into solitary. They all faced the death penalty. John Clutchkey, Felita Drumgo, and George Jackson. Were the brothers charged with the murder. George Jackson, a brilliant revolutionary, fierce writer, was Jonathan Jackson's brother. I read this book on Rockfin. If you guys would like to, George Jackson's book, you guys can go to my Rockfin channel and you guys can read it. I can't read it on. I can't really read it on YouTube because it's too spicy for YouTube, and it has guerrilla warfare tactics in the book. That's why. But it's a great read, and I encourage you to read it. If you guys would like to, you guys can go to my channel on Rockfin. Go ahead and take a look. This was George Jackson. So you guys have that. Let's continue. I couldn't get the whole thing out of my head. Why were grown men and women living while Jonathan Jackson lay dead? What kind of rage, what kind of oppression, and what kind of country shaped that young man? I felt guilt for being alive and well. Where was my gun? Where was my courage? I was dry-eyed when I attended the funeral. There were hundreds of people. We could barely get into the church. They set up a loudspeaker outside so that people could hear the sermon. Black Panthers, solemn and determined, marched in military formation. I was so glad they were there. Black people needed someone to stand up for us, or we'll always be victims. I held my arms real close to me, feeling a bit unraveled. Life for us gets so ugly. If I stay a victim, it will kill me, I thought. It was time for me to get my shit together. I wanted to be one of the people who stood up. These were serious times. Angela Davis was running for her life. They had hooked her up with Jonathan Jackson, charging her with kidnapping and murder at the courthouse, even though she was nowhere on the set. They charged her with murder because they claimed that some of the guns belonged to her. She was one of the most beautiful women I had ever seen. Not physically, but spiritually. I knew who she was because I had been keeping clippings of her in my file. She was the sister who got fired from her job teaching at California College because she told everybody that she was a communist. And if they didn't like it, they could go to hell. But I wasn't surprised. They will charge black people with anything using a flimsy excuse. If you guys have not seen my interview with Akila Nai from the African People's Socialist Party, go ahead and take a look at that. I interviewed her twice. This was the first time was a few months ago, and then just recently last week. And they're using flimsy excuses to go up against the African People's Socialist Party, which basically means that they did the exact same thing years ago. They're doing the exact same thing today. Excuse me. So the more things change, the more they stay the same. We were very glad they hadn't caught her. I hope they never would. The air was charged. Everything was happening so fast, and I wasn't blind anymore. I was seeing things straight, seeing them more clearly than ever before. I had so many things to do. If you're deaf, dumb, and blind to what's happening in the world, You are under no obligation to do anything. But if you know what's happening and you don't do anything but sit on your ass, then you're nothing but a punk. I tried to explain how I felt to some of the people I knew. I wanted to struggle on a full-time basis. They urged me to join the Panther Party. I went over in my mind all the criticisms I had of the party. They had said, "You'll be good for the party, and the party will be good for you. The party is only as strong as its people." It made a lot of sense to me. For the first time in months, I felt calm and sure of what I was going to do. I told them that the first thing I was going to do when I returned to New York was join the party. I thought about it all the way home. Of all the things I had wanted to be when I was a little girl, revolutionary certainly wasn't one of them. And now it's the only thing I wanted to do. Everything else was secondary. It occurred to me that even though I wanted to become a revolutionary more than anything else in the world, I still didn't have the slightest idea what I would have to do to become one. That's chapter 13. What did you guys think? Man, happy birthday, Assata Shakur, man. And the interesting thing was, she was there when George Jackson's brother, Jonathan Jackson, was murdered. And so, Assata Shakur, she's, still alive, and I hope she's still well in Cuba. And I cannot wait until we change this country. Hopefully we do it soon so that Assata Shakur can come home, be in her country, and experience true freedom in this country rather than what she had to endure years ago. So yeah. Did you guys like the stream? Go ahead and give me a like. If you guys haven't, subscribed, then go ahead and subscribe if you like. But yeah. Because we're live, I'm going to go into the chat just to say hello to some people that have joined recently. And then we have Nadia coming in saying, "Cheers, comrades." Good to see you, Nadia. Thank you so much. Old Man Barker says, "Hey, buddies. Good to see you, Old Man Barker." We have Cobra Commander saying, "Howdy, Nadia." All right, giving Nadia some love. Black Unit Griffin giving some hearts. Thank you so very much. Good to see you, Black Unit Griffin. All right. Noah says, "Being a Gemini, I really appreciate both you and Rome's styles and personalities. My son appreciates your style more, though. He's very calm." Oh, thank you. Appreciate that. Good to see you, Norman Keena. Nice to have you. All right. And yes, Nadia, this is really good stuff. Let me check the Rockfin side. All right. And then let me check the Rumble side. Wow. Okay. It doesn't feel like a Sunday for some reason. Does it feel like a Sunday to you? It felt like Sunday earlier, but for some reason, now that I'm streaming, it doesn't feel like Sunday right now. But it's okay. Okay. Salty 3 Crew. Yes, Salty 3 Crew. Can you give Salty 3 Crew a shout out, please? Shout out to Salty 3 Crew. Thank you so very much for watching. Also, welcome to the chat. So thank you so very much for watching on the Rumble side. All right, we got people watching on Rumble too, so it's great. All right. Oh, thank you so much for the super chat, Noah. Thank you for being you. Thank you. That means a lot because I go through periods of imposter syndrome. And so whenever, I'm doing something, it feels like it's just not, going the way I would like for it to. Like back in May, I was hoping to be at 3,000 subs by May, and I haven't reached it yet. But that's okay. I'm still growing, and I'm still learning. I'm still doing better. So that's the point. Sometimes it's not about how fast you grow. The point is that you're just still growing. I'm not stagnant. I'm not going backwards. I'm moving forward. So, things like this really do mean a lot. Thank you so very much. I mean it from the top and bottom of my heart. And so, one of the things that I think is important is that we take Assata's words and we realize that we have to open our eyes to other groups and see excuse me, and see their humanity. Once we humanize other disenfranchised groups around us, then we also realize we're all in the same boat. People who are disabled are being exploited. They're being downtrodden just like you. There may be women out there that are also going through the same things that we are. And also, we got to realize sometimes we can also be tools of the oppressor unknowingly. Are we expressing some views that may be problematic towards other disenfranchised groups? May we have some traditionalist views that really are kind of misogynistic, that pits us against women? Is that possible? Because women are workers. Are we expressing views that may be more calling undocumented immigrants illegals without realizing that they are our fellow workers in this country? What about people who are trans? Are we looking at them as an attack on children or an attack on people in this country? Attack on the moral values in this country? When in reality, the real attack on moral values is the fact that they're being exploited and they are also being targeted just like we are. They may be targeted in different ways, but they're targeted nonetheless. Our solidarity needs to go across the spectrum so that we so that we can change things for the better. Humans come in a variety. The thing is that the corporate dictators don't want you to realize that. They don't want us to have solidarity with one another despite our differences. And I think that is really important. We have to look at each other in our humanness and we cannot allow the corporate dictators, the ultra wealthy, the oppressor class to pit us against one another. So we have to work on ourselves. That internalized white supremacy, we have to we have to decolonize our minds. That internalized homophobia, we have to decolonize our minds. That internalized misogynoir, that internalized xenophobia, that internalized ableism. I have to combat these things, right? You have to combat these things. But as long as we continue to work on ourselves, a revolution of the heart, it'll come out outwardly too. That's what's important. Notori, good to see you, bud. All right. Nice to have you in the chat. So, yeah. And so with that, I'm going to be heading out. Brothers got to eat. Brothers got to get ready for tomorrow. I got dialysis in the morning. I got to be up for 4:30 in the morning. I really don't feel like being up that late. I got to take a shower before I go to bed because I am not going to feel like waking up early to take a shower. Lord and Lord. Ugh. Mm-mm-mm. So yeah, but thank you so very much for tuning in, everyone. If you guys would like to, you guys can get email notifications through my Substack. You guys could go to jaybefaunt.substack.com for those notifications so that you guys are aware and alerted to whenever I upload clips or go live like I did this evening. And a big shout out and thank you to the patrons on Patreon, Coffee, members, people who donate to my GoFundMe or to my Cash App or to my Venmo. Thank you so very much to all of you. It does not go unnoticed, and it keeps me being able to have this channel and do the work that I do. Without you guys, I would not be able to do this at all. And be sure to, if you guys have not, I already uploaded a new reading for Laziness Does Not Exist by Dr. Devon Price yesterday. It was a great reading, and I intend to do the next reading very soon because this book has been very cathartic for me. So I appreciate you guys watching that. Also, be sure to tune in on Tuesday at 2 when I go live. I'll be talking about some news stories. So, yeah, it's going to be good. So, as I always tell you guys, look, water your plants, water yourselves, leave the world better than you found it. Reading is fundamental, and just make sure to see people, see yourself and others. Don't just pass people off. And if they have a difference of opinion, see why that difference of opinion is. And don't just wave people away just for having that difference of opinion. If they need some work on something or if they need some readjusting, be kind in that readjusting. Because the world isn't kind. The system is not kind to them. And so that's what's important. Now, some people can be jerks, but deal with them accordingly. But try to put your kindest foot forward. And that includes being kind to yourself. So I want to be kind to you and give you a forehead kiss. Mwah! Thank you so very much. I love you for watching. Thank you so very much. And have a beautiful Sunday evening. Let's sing it out. Butterfly in the sky.